Russia has made a big mistake. It's a mistake that looks like a major win for the country's President Vladimir Putin, at least on the surface. But it's also a blunder that looks set to bring new countries into his special military operation in Ukraine, leaving his beleaguered soldiers facing the prospect of fighting against even more powerful foes. What is that mistake? Saying yes when North Korea offered to send 10,000 soldiers to help Russia in its fight against Ukraine. The Pentagon says that's the number of North Korean troops that will arrive in Russia over the next few weeks to train and fight on Putin's behalf. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has already called this move a significant escalation in the Ukraine war that shows Putin's expansionist desires. But Russia's president couldn't have anticipated that his decision to work with North Korea could have consequences far outside Europe. Now, it's not just Ukraine with which he has to contend. Another country is about to enter the fray: South Korea. North Korea's greatest enemy has had enough of its neighbor sticking its nose in where it doesn't belong. South Korea is about to get involved in Putin's special military operation in a big way to force North Korean soldiers out of Ukraine. Keep watching this video to find out how Putin's blunder has changed the face of the Ukraine war. But first, the North Korean involvement. With over 10,000 North Korean soldiers flowing into Russia, the obvious question is, where are they all going? On October 31st, Al Jazeera reported that Kursk is their likely destination. The Russian oblast has been the subject of a Ukrainian invasion since early August 2024. Ukraine currently holds around 460 square miles of territory in Kursk, which includes up to 93 villages and settlements that it overran in the space of a month. Putin hasn't managed to dislodge those Ukrainian soldiers in the nearly 3 months that have followed the initial invasion. He needs more people. That's where North Korea comes into play. Al Jazeera says that the Pentagon has confirmed the entry of North Korean troops into Kursk. Pentagon spokesperson Pat Ryder says that there are a small number of North Korean troops in the Kursk Oblast, with a couple thousand more that are almost there or due to arrive imminently. This is actually a clever strategy by Putin. Those North Korean soldiers aren't going into Ukraine, meaning he can make the defense that he's only working with North Korea to push Ukraine soldiers out of Russia's territory. Plus, he gets manpower to feed into what is likely to become a Kursk meat grinder, akin to the one he's created in Ukraine, without sacrificing his more experienced Russian soldiers. Putin has been bullish when pressed on the arrival of North Korean soldiers in his country. Speaking at a news conference toward the end of October, he said, "This is our sovereign decision," without directly answering the question of whether the soldiers had arrived. Putin claimed, "Whether we use it or not, where, how, or whether we engage in exercises, training, or transfer some experience, it's our business." Ukraine's allies aren't convinced that Russia won't use North Korean soldiers to attack Ukraine. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen echoed Mark Rutte's sentiments that Russia's move is a grave decision, before adding that the European Union, or EU, would respond together with our like-minded partners. South Korea is set to be one of those partners, but we'll get back to that soon. More worrying for Ukraine, and by extension South Korea, is the news that North Korea is touching in Moscow for her second visit in just 6 weeks. The Singaporean news outlet CNA says few details are available about the nature of this meeting, but Cho will likely meet with Russian officials to discuss the possibility of North Korea sending even more soldiers to Russia. Again, Russia is protesting its innocence when it comes to Cho's visit. Moscow claims that discussions are taking place within a pre-established strategic dialogue framework. As is so often the case, Russia is being cagey over the specific purposes of its conversations with its allies. AP News speculates the meeting will be a high-level negotiation, with Cho offering more troops in exchange for certain benefits only Russia can provide. Could those benefits include technology that would help North Korea to advance its ailing nuclear weapons program? It's possible. Access to more advanced technology seems to be the key reason for North Korea allying itself with Russia. It all adds up to a worrying situation for Ukraine and South Korea. Seeing up to 10,000 North Korean soldiers flood into Kursk is a big enough problem. Ukraine is relying on holding that territory to give it a bargaining chip it can use against Russia if the two countries ever find their way toward peace negotiations. But the news of Cho's visit to Moscow brings with it the prospect of North Korea dedicating even more of its 1.32 million active military personnel to Putin's cause. Plus, Russia's caginess about the arrival of these North Korean troops and their purpose in the country means there's an ever-present threat that they may move beyond Kursk and fight Ukraine on its own soil. Still, Ukraine is going to do what it's done since Russia's invasion of February 2022: fight with all of its might. On October 28, 2024, Lithuanian news outlet LRT reported that the first clashes between Ukraine and North Korean soldiers had already taken place in Kursk. That's according to Jonas Oman, who heads the Lithuanian Blue-Yellow non-governmental organization. Oman says that his sources in the Ukrainian armed forces say Ukraine had already killed the first North Korean soldier months before the 10,000 troops arrived in Russia. To my knowledge, the first North Korean was killed in Ukraine a couple of months ago by a drone handed over by Blue-Yellow, claims Oman. He also says that his contacts in the Ukrainian intelligence sector tell him they believe the number of North Korean soldiers heading into Russia could climb as high as 88,000. That's over 3 times more soldiers than those who serve in Lithuania's active military. The takeaway here is that North Korea is adamant about getting directly involved in Putin's special military operation. It already was long before the reports of the 10,000 soldiers came out, if Oman is correct. This is where South Korea comes in. When the news broke about North Korea sending soldiers to Russia, South Korean President Yoon made his feelings known. Speaking at a summit meeting with Polish President Andrzej Duda, who was visiting Seoul, Yoon claimed his country would not sit idle in the face of North Korean provocation that threatens global security beyond the Korean peninsula and Europe. What does not sitting idle mean to South Korea's president? Extending his country's security cooperation with Ukraine is high on the agenda. CNA notes that Yoon has already spoken with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky about North Korea's presence in Kursk. Both agree that Putin's special military operation has extended beyond Russia and Ukraine, becoming an internationalized battle in the process. So South Korea's first effort to get North Korea out of Ukraine involves sharing military intelligence and expertise. That's invaluable to Ukraine. No country knows the threat North Korea poses better than South Korea, as the two countries have been at loggerheads since the end of the Korean War in 1953. CNA believes that Ukraine is preparing to dispatch an envoy to South Korea to facilitate this intelligence sharing. Ukraine would get direct access to a South Korean spy network that keeps constant tabs on North Korea's actions. That alone could help Ukraine to react to any further cooperation between Moscow and Pyongyang. But that's not all South Korea is doing. Intelligence sharing alone isn't going to result in South Korea kicking North Korea out of the Ukraine war. The country intends to do more to help Ukraine with its North Korean problem. That starts with changing the way it sends aid to Ukraine. South Korea has always been an ally of Ukraine. However, it stopped short of sending weapons and direct military aid to the country. Denton's reports that most of South Korea's aid comes in financial or humanitarian forms, with the country having committed $394 million to Ukraine in 2024. Approximately a quarter of that aid, $98 million, is earmarked to help Ukraine with the reconstruction of buildings and land that Russia's military campaign has devastated. $196 million goes towards serving Ukraine's immediate humanitarian needs, with some of that money also funding international organizations on the ground in the war-torn country. Add to all of this the $24 million South Korea has pledged to NATO's Ukraine Trust Fund for 2025, and it's clear that Seoul has previously supported Ukraine from afar. It sends money generously for non-military purposes, but it's not sending weapons or direct military aid. That may be about to change now that North Korean soldiers are in Russia and fighting against Ukraine in Kursk. During the same summit in which South Korean President Yoon claimed his country won't sit idle in the face of North Korean aggression, the prospect of sending weapons to Ukraine was raised. While we have maintained our principle of not directly supplying lethal weapons, we can also review our stance more flexibly depending on the level of North Korean military activities. This wasn't a direct confirmation that South Korea is preparing to send weapons to Ukraine, but it's telling that Yoon's comments came during a meeting with Poland's Prime Minister. AP News reports that Poland and South Korea have signed multiple arms deals over the last couple of years, with Poland purchasing howitzers, missile launchers and tanks. Perhaps Yoon is hinting at the possibility of indirectly supplying weapons by providing them to Ukrainian allies, who can then donate the weapons as intermediaries. Alternatively, Yoon may be hiding what South Korea has up its sleeve for the North Korean soldiers in Ukraine. The AP News report also notes that Yoon's comments about supplying weapons roughly align with similar statements made by an anonymous senior presidential official days before. That official claimed South Korea was in the process of considering its options, with those discussions including the possibility of sending both defensive and offensive weapon systems into Ukraine. South Korea sending weapons would be a boon for Ukraine. The Center for Strategic and International Studies says that South Korea produces around 200,000 155mm artillery shells annually, meaning it has plenty stocked up to feed Ukraine's howitzers and similar weapons. If South Korea is serious about kicking North Korea out of Ukraine, setting itself up as a consistent supplier of the shells Ukraine needs so desperately to defend its territory and attack Russian positions would be a good start. But something is standing in the way of South Korea supplying weapons to Ukraine: the country's laws. Speaking to the Kyiv Independent, Stimson Korea Program Director Jenny Town says South Korea has thus far avoided sending military aid to Ukraine, not as a matter of policy, but of law. The president can't just say, "Hey, I've changed my mind. Here's what we're going to do now." It really does require actual legislation to be passed. Yoon may lack the authority to push that legislation through, according to Town, due to his approval ratings in South Korea being just 24.1%. But it's equally possible that the South Korean people, so used to the ever-present threat from their neighbor, could see North Korea's entry into Russia as a reason to change the country's laws. Yoon may push for just that if North Korea sends even more troops to Russia. And that's not all. In addition to raising the possibility of sending weapons, however unlikely that may be from a legal standpoint, Seoul is also suggesting it may do something else to kick North Korea out of Ukraine: send South Korean troops to defend its ally. On October 22nd, the Kyiv Independent reported on the Yonhap agency's claims that South Korea is considering sending personnel into Ukraine to monitor the movements of North Korean troops. A source from the agency said, "There's a possibility that personnel will be sent to Ukraine to monitor the tactics and combat capabilities of North Korean special forces dispatched in support of Russia. Such a team may include intelligence personnel who could pass on information about North Korean military tactics to Kyiv. South Korean soldiers may also help Ukraine handle the interrogations of any North Korean soldiers it captures." So far, the concept of sending South Korean troops into Ukraine is speculative. There's no official word from Seoul, and even